My name is Linda, and I'm 33 years old. 2 years ago, my cousin's husband stood up at Thanksgiving dinner and announced to 30 people that I'd never own a home, that I was wasting my salary on rent like some kind of failure. Everyone laughed, my own mother nodded. But that night, while they toasted his new mortgage, I quietly unlocked the front door of the house they were sitting in because I'd bought it 6 months earlier with cash, and the deed said my name. You see, it wasn't just that one dinner. My cousin Mark had been baiting me for years, pointing out every apartment I rented, every lease I signed, always in front of an audience. And my family, they took his side. They believed the story that I was reckless with money, that I'd never amount to anything, so I did the only thing that made sense. I stopped telling them the truth. For 18 months, I saved in secret, bought a house, and never said a word. They thought they knew me. But I was building something they couldn't see, and this is where it all comes apart. To understand how we got here, you need to know the story long before that Thanksgiving dinner. I grew up in a three-bedroom colonial in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the youngest of three. My older brother Jason was the golden child, star quarterback, full ride to UConn. My sister Claire was the artist, everyone's favorite, always painting something pretty. And me? I was the one who balanced the checkbook at 12 because my mom couldn't. My dad worked double shifts at a metal fabrication plant. My mom did nails out of the guest bathroom. Money was tight and everyone talked about it openly, constantly. By the time I was 16, I had two jobs, one at a diner, one at a dry cleaner. I graduated high school with $12,000 in a savings account nobody knew about. Not my parents, not my siblings, nobody. I learned early that if you let people see your money, they start having opinions about it. After high school, I didn't go to college. I couldn't afford it and I refused to take loans. So I worked full-time, moved into a studio apartment above a pizza shop on State Street. Rent was $600 a month. I paid it on time every single month for 7 years. And every year, my cousin Mark would show up at a family gathering, slap me on the back and say, "Still renting, huh? You know that's just throwing money away, right?" He'd look around the table, waiting for the nods. And he always got them. My brother Jason would smirk. Claire would look at her phone. My dad would clear his throat and change the subject. But my mom, she'd give me this look, half pity, half disappointment. Not once did anyone say, "Hey, maybe she has a plan." They all just assumed I was stuck. But here's what they didn't see. During those 7 years, I was working a full-time job and building a parallel life. I got my real estate license on the side, passed the exam on my first try. I started wholesaling properties, small fix and flips, with a partner I met at a networking event, a guy named Derek. We'd buy distressed houses, renovate them, sell them within 6 months. My cut from the first three deals, $87,000. I put every penny into a separate account. No one knew, not Derek, not my family. I told Derek I was saving for a house. That was technically true. By year 5, I had enough for a 20% down payment on a decent home in a nice neighborhood. But I didn't buy, I kept saving, I watched the market, I waited for the right moment, and I kept my mouth shut. That was the hardest part. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday, I sat there while Mark bragged about his three-bedroom colonial and his 2% interest rate. I smiled, nodded, ate my mashed potatoes, and never said a word. My sister Claire once pulled me aside after a barbecue and said, "You know, you could at least pretend to try. It's embarrassing for mom." I looked her in the eye and said, "I'm trying, just not the way you see." She rolled her eyes and walked away. That's the thing about being underestimated. You get to move in total silence. Then in early 2022, the market shifted. Interest rates started climbing. Houses that had been selling in days started sitting. Sellers got nervous. I'd been tracking a particular property in Fairfield County, a four-bedroom Cape Cod that had been on the market for 92 days, originally listed at $515,000. It had dropped 3 times, down to 435. I knew the neighborhood, I knew the comps. I knew the owner was a retired couple moving to Florida and they needed to close fast. I didn't tell anyone, not even Derek. I called the listing agent, made a cash offer, $395,000. They countered at 410. I said 400, take it or leave it. They took it. I closed 30 days later. I paid cash, no mortgage, no bank. The deed was recorded in my name, Linda, sole owner, no co-signers, no loans. I moved in with a single suitcase and a mattress on the floor. I didn't tell a soul. For 6 months, I lived in that house alone. I painted the walls myself. I planted hydrangeas in the front yard. I paid the property taxes in full, and I said nothing to my family, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to choose the moment. I'd been their joke for so long that the reveal had to be perfect. And that moment came on Thanksgiving 2022. Mark had just bought his house the month before, 30-year fixed at 6.8%. He was insufferable. He spent the entire appetizer course walking around showing everyone photos of his granite countertops. He asked me loudly across the table, "So Linda, still giving your money to a landlord? You know my mortgage is only $2,300 a month. What are you paying, like $1,500 for that shoebox?" The table went quiet. My mom looked at her plate. My dad took a long sip of beer. I set down my fork, reached into my bag, and pulled out a single piece of paper, not the deed. Not the mortgage statement, a photo of my front door with a wreath I'd made myself. I slid it across the table. Mark picked it up, squinted, passed it to his wife. "What's this?" I smiled. "That's my front door, the one I own. Bought it 6 months ago. Cash, no mortgage, no landlord." For a long 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mark laughed, a forced hollow sound. "Sure you did. You can't afford a down payment." I pulled out my phone, opened the county property appraiser website, and turned the screen toward him. His name was right there, Linda M. Property owner, no liens. The color drained from his face. My mom started crying, my dad stared at me like he'd never seen me before, and Claire, for the first time in my life, looked at me with something that wasn't pity, it was respect, but that wasn't the end. Because later that night, as I was putting on my coat to leave, Mark followed me to the driveway. His voice was low and it wasn't friendly. He said, "You think you're clever, you think this changes anything? I know where you got that money, Linda, and it wasn't from flips." I froze, my hand was on the car door handle. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer. "I've been doing some digging. That partner of yours, Derek, I know what you two were really doing, and if you don't keep your mouth shut about tonight, I'll make sure everyone else knows too." He turned and walked back inside. I stood there in the cold, heart pounding, keys shaking in my hand. That's when I realized the house wasn't my victory, it was the bait, and the trap was about to spring. I stood there in the driveway, the cold air biting my face. Mark's words hung in the air like smoke. "I know where you got that money, Linda, and it wasn't from flips." My mind raced. What could he know? The flips were legitimate, every single one. Permits, inspections, title transfers, all above board, but Mark had never shown interest in my life before. Why now? I got in my car, drove home on autopilot, and sat in the dark living room of my house for an hour. The house I owned. The house that was supposed to be my victory lap. Instead, it felt like a trap door. I called Derek the next morning. He answered on the first ring, which was unusual. Derek was a man of delayed responses. "We need to talk," I said. "Mark knows something about us, about the deals." There was a long pause, then Derek's voice came through low and measured. "What exactly did he say?" I repeated the conversation. Another pause. "Linda, I need to tell you something I should have told you before we started." My stomach dropped. "What?" "That first deal, the duplex on Elm Street, the seller, Mr. Petrocelli, he was a referral from my cousin, and my cousin, he had a record, tax evasion, nothing violent, but the IRS had flagged him. The title search came back clean, but the money trail, it could look bad if someone dug deep enough." I felt the floor tilt. "Derek, you told me that deal was clean." "It was clean, the property was legit, but the source of the funding, my cousin lent me the down payment. I paid him back with interest from our first 3 sales. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry, and I didn't think anyone would ever look." I closed my eyes. Mark looked. "Mark doesn't have proof, but if he starts asking questions, people might connect dots that lead back to my cousin, and if the IRS takes an interest, they'll audit every deal we've ever done." That's when I realized I'd been blind. I'd trusted Derek completely, and he'd hidden a single thread that could unravel everything. I spent the next week in a state of controlled panic. I went to work, came home, made calls to 3 different lawyers, all off the record. Everyone told me the same thing: without a direct link to fraud, there was no case. But an investigation could freeze assets, including my house, the house I'd paid cash for, the house I lived in, the house I could lose. Meanwhile, Mark was quiet, too quiet. I didn't hear from him for 5 days. Then on a Tuesday night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the diner on Main. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Come alone." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, running scenarios in my head. Confront him, record the conversation, bring a witness. But I knew if I brought anyone, he'd clam up. I had to play his game to find out what he wanted. The diner was nearly empty at 7 in the morning. Mark was already sitting in a booth near the back, nursing a coffee. He didn't stand when I approached. He didn't even look up. "Sit down, Linda." I sat. "What do you want?" He set down his mug and finally met my eyes. There was something different in them, not anger, desperation. "I need your help." I almost laughed. "You threatened me, you said you'd ruin me, and now you need my help?" He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm in trouble, big trouble. The house, I lied about the interest rate. I got a subprime loan from a private lender. The payments are ballooning. I'm 3 months behind. They're threatening foreclosure. I need $50,000 by the end of the month or I lose everything." I stared at him. "That's not my problem. It is if I tell everyone that your flips were funded by a convicted tax evader. I don't have proof, but I'll make it sound convincing. Your mom already thinks you're shady. Imagine what the rest of the family will say." He had me, but then I noticed something. His hands were shaking. He was bluffing, but he was also desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I sat back. "Mark, I'm going to ask you one question. Did you ever actually verify your suspicion about Derek's cousin, or did you just guess?" He hesitated. I saw a name on a public record, looked it up. That guy had a tax lien. I put 2 and 2 together." "You put 2 and 2 together and got 5. That deal was clean. The cousin wasn't involved in any of our subsequent transactions. You have nothing." Mark's face went pale. "But you said," I said, "you were wrong. And I can prove it. I have all the paperwork, every transaction, every title, every bank transfer. I've already given copies to my lawyer. If you try to smear me, I'll sue you for defamation and malicious prosecution, and I'll win." His bravado crumbled. He looked down at his coffee. "I'm sorry, Linda, I'm scared." I felt a flicker of something, not sympathy, but clarity. His threat was hollow and he knew it, but his desperation was real, and that gave me leverage. I stood up. "I'm not giving you money, but I'll tell you what I will do. I'll give you the name of a credit counselor, a real one, and I won't tell anyone about this conversation if you drop the whole thing permanently. And you owe me an apology at the next family dinner, public." He nodded slowly. "Deal." I walked out of that diner with my house still mine and my reputation intact, but something had shifted. Mark wasn't the real threat. The real threat was the system that made him act that way, and the fact that I'd been so secretive that I'd given him ammunition. I learned something that day. Winning the house wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of fight, not against my family, but against the assumption that my silence made me weak. I decided right then that I would never be silent again and I would never let anyone hold a secret over my head. Not Mark, not Derek, not anyone. That was the pivot. And it led me straight into the next phase of this story, which was bigger than one house, one cousin, and one Thanksgiving dinner. Just 2 weeks after the diner, I got a letter that changed everything, certified mail from the Connecticut Department of Banking. They were opening an investigation into a series of real estate transactions in Fairfield County, including 3 I had been directly involved in, not as a target, the letter said, but as a person of interest. My stomach dropped through the floor. I called Derek immediately. The call went straight to voicemail. I left 5 messages over the next 3 hours. Nothing. Then I drove to his office. The door was locked, the windows were dark. A neighbor told me he'd left town 2 days ago, said he was visiting family in Florida, but I knew better. Derek was gone, and he'd left me holding the bag. I spent the next 72 hours in a state of controlled terror. I hired a lawyer, a real one this time, a woman named Alicia Reyes who specialized in financial crimes defense. Her first question was simple: did you know about any illegal activity? I told her about Derek's cousin, the tax lien, the unreported loan. She nodded, made notes, and then asked a question I hadn't considered. Did you sign any documents that misrepresented the value of the properties you flipped? I thought back the appraisals. Derek had handled all of them. I'd signed the closing statements, but I trusted him. Alicia's face went tight. We need to pull every file, every appraisal, every inspection report. If even one of them was inflated, it could look like you were part of a conspiracy to defraud lenders. I felt the walls closing in. I had a house, a job, a life, and all of it could vanish because of one man's lies. The investigation expanded faster than I could track. 2 weeks after the first letter, I received a subpoena for all financial records, bank statements, tax returns, everything dating back 5 years. My employer put me on unpaid leave pending the outcome. My mother called, panicked. Linda, what's going on? I heard from your cousin that you're being investigated for fraud. Mark, he'd leaked it. I told her the truth, as much as I knew. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said something I never expected. You should have told me you were buying a house. Maybe I could have helped. I almost laughed. For years she dismissed me, and now she wanted to help. But I didn't have the energy for bitterness. I needed allies. I started digging on my own. I pulled public records for every deal Derek and I had done, 9 transactions over 3 years. I cross-referenced the appraisers, the title companies, the buyers, and I found a pattern. 7 of the 9 properties had used the same appraiser, a man named Gary Harmon. His reports were consistently 10 to 15% above market value. At the time, I thought we were just getting good deals. Now I saw it for what it was: systematic inflation. I called Alicia. You need to look at Gary Harmon, he's the thread. She put her investigator on it. Within a week, they found that Harmon had been paid kickbacks by Derek's cousin for each inflated appraisal. The cousin was the real mastermind, using Derek as a front to launder money from an offshore account, and I was the unwitting fall guy. I had to make a choice. I could stay quiet, let the investigation run its course, and hope my ignorance protected me, or I could go on the offensive and turn over everything I'd found. Alicia advised the second option, but she warned me, cooperating means you become a witness against Derek and his cousin. That could put you in danger. I thought about Sarah, the friend I'd lost, the one who told me to finish what I started. I thought about Mark, who'd wanted to tear me down out of his own desperation. And I thought about my house, the one I'd bought with blood and sweat and silence. I was done being silent. I walked into the state attorney's office with a binder of evidence: appraisals, emails from Derek, bank statements showing the cousin's involvement. I told them everything. They listened for 4 hours. At the end, the lead investigator shook my hand. You've just made our case a lot stronger. But he also said, you will likely face charges for negligence. You signed documents without verifying their accuracy. That's on you. I nodded. I knew that. I had been so focused on proving my family wrong that I had stopped paying attention to the details. I had trusted someone who didn't deserve it. Next 3 months were a nightmare. I was charged with 2 counts of negligent misrepresentation, a misdemeanor. I faced up to a year of probation and a fine. But more devastating, the state filed a lien against my house, seeking to recover proceeds from the inflated deals. I could lose everything. In court, the prosecutor laid out the case. My lawyer argued that I had no knowledge of the fraud. The judge listened, then asked me directly, did you benefit financially from the inflated appraisals? I told the truth. I made a profit on each deal, but I paid taxes on every dollar. I had no idea the appraisals were fraudulent. The judge paused. Your ignorance does not absolve you of your responsibility to verify the accuracy of the documents you sign, but in light of your full cooperation, I am inclined to be lenient. I received 18 months of probation, a $10,000 fine, and I had to surrender any profits from the 3 tainted deals. That was $42,000. I sold my house 6 weeks later, took the equity, and paid the fine. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. The same kind I'd lived in for 7 years. From the outside, it looked like I'd lost everything. My family saw it as proof that I had never really made it. Mark smirked at the next gathering, my mother sighed, but I knew something they didn't. That ordeal had stripped away the fantasy. I was no longer pretending to have it all. I was rebuilding from real ground, and this time I would not be silent. I would not trust blindly. And I would never let anyone else define my worth. That's when I decided to write this story, not as a shame, but as a warning and a promise, because the next chapter was going to be different. I wrote the first draft of this story on a legal pad at my kitchen table in that one-bedroom apartment with a cup of coffee gone cold beside me. I wrote it not as a confession, but as a record, every name, every deal, every lie, every truth. I wanted to own the narrative before anyone else could twist it again. I sent the draft to Alicia, my lawyer. She read it and called me the same night. If you publish this, you're going to open old wounds. Are you ready for that? I told her I was. Because the wounds weren't old, they were still open, and the only way they'd heal was if I let the air get to them. I started a blog, small at first, just a Substack. I called it The Closing Table. The first post told the whole story from the diner job to the house to the investigation to the plea. I didn't hold back. I named Derek, I named Gary Harmon, I named my cousin Mark, though I changed his name to protect my aunt. I named my own mistakes. Within a week, the post had been shared over 12,000 times. The comments were a flood. Some called me reckless, others called me brave. But the majority said the same thing. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. That's when I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a blueprint for everyone who had been marginalized, underestimated, and then blamed when they fought back. 3 months after I started the blog, I got an email from a producer at a documentary studio. She said she'd read every post and wanted to tell the full story on video. I hesitated. I just got out of the worst legal mess of my life. Why would I invite cameras in? She said something that stuck with me. Because the scandal isn't your shame, it's the systems, and people need to see that you survived it. I agreed. Over the next 6 months, I worked with a small team to produce this documentary. Every interview, every reenactment, every word I'm speaking now is part of that process, and something unexpected happened. As I told the story out loud, the power it had over me started to fade. I could finally look at the house photos without feeling sick. I could hear Mark's name without my chest tightening. The narrative that had trapped me became the key that unlocked me. Then about 3 weeks ago, I received a certified letter from the Connecticut Department of Banking. Not a subpoena this time, a notice of closure. The investigation had concluded. Derek's cousin had been indicted on 13 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. Derek had turned state's witness in exchange for a reduced sentence, and I was officially cleared of any wrongdoing beyond the negligence I'd already pled to. The lien on my old house released, the money I'd surrendered. They returned $42,000 plus interest. I sat on my apartment floor and stared at that letter for 10 minutes. Then I called my mother. She didn't say much. But at the end of the call, she said, "I'm proud of you, Linda, not for the house, for getting back up." That was the first time she'd ever said those words. I hung up and cried. Now here's where it gets interesting. When the $42,000 came back, I had a choice. I could put it toward a new down payment, buy another house, try to reclaim the dream, or I could do something else. I thought about Sarah, my friend who died. She always said the best investment isn't property, it's people, so I started a fund. A small grant program for first-generation homebuyers who have been told they don't belong. The Linda Grant, it's not huge. It will help maybe 4 or 5 families this year, but it's real, and it's mine. This time, I'm not hiding what I'm doing. I'm publishing every grant decision on the blog. Transparency is the only way to break the cycle. My family still gathers for holidays, but the dynamic has shifted. Mark doesn't ask about my mortgage anymore. He doesn't ask about anything. We're civil, but there's a quiet respect that wasn't there before. My mother brags about me to her friends. My father, who never said much, called me last week to ask if I needed help with the grant paperwork. He's a retired accountant. I said yes. We spent 2 hours on the phone, the longest conversation we've had in 20 years. The house I bought is gone, but what it bought me is more valuable: a voice, a purpose, and a family that finally sees me. One last detail. A few days ago, I was cleaning out a box of old papers and found the original mortgage statement I'd held up in that thumbnail. The one from Thanksgiving. It was crumpled, coffee-stained. I smoothed it out and noticed something I'd never seen before. At the bottom of the page in tiny print, a note from the title company. "Congratulations on your purchase. You are now part of a community that values integrity." It had been there the whole time, I just hadn't read it. That's the thing about the truths. It's often already written right in front of you. You just have to be ready to see it. So where does that leave us? The story is not over, not really. It never is. The grant applications are rolling in, the blog keeps growing, and I'm sitting here in a small apartment with a legal pad and a cup of cold coffee writing this final chapter. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. My name is Linda. I'm 33 years old. I own my story. And if one person watching this decides to stop hiding their own truth, then every single thing I went through was worth it. Let me tell you what I learned and how you can take the first steps. Here's what I learned. The people who laughed at me weren't laughing because I was failing. They were laughing because my success threatened their story. The story where I was supposed to stay small, stay quiet, stay renting forever, and when I proved them wrong, they didn't celebrate. They tried to tear it down. That's not about me, that's about them. But here's the part I want you to hold on to. The investigation, the plea, the lost house, all of it hurt. But it also gave me something I never would have found otherwise. A clear view of who actually had my back, almost no one. And that was liberating because it meant I could stop performing for an audience that never believed in me. I could start building for the people who would come after me. The Linda Grant is small. It will help maybe 5 families this year. But next year, if this documentary reaches enough people, maybe it'll be 10, maybe it'll be 100. I want the kid who's told they'll never own a home, the young woman whose family dismisses her financial independence, the person who feels like they're invisible at their own dinner table to see this and know they are not alone. And more importantly, they are not wrong. The system is rigged, but it's not unbeatable. The secret is not to play by the rules they set for you, it's to make your own rules and to write them down, to publish them, to let the truth be your foundation, not your liability. I still get nervous before family gatherings. That doesn't go away, but now I walk in knowing that I own the story. They don't get to define me anymore. And neither does a mortgage statement, a court filing, or a cousin's smirk. I define me, that's the only power that matters. So here's my final question for you. What story are you letting someone else write for you, and what would it take to pick up the pen? If this video made you think, if it made you feel something, drop a comment below and tell me the one thing you're ready to stop hiding. I read every single one, and if you want to follow the next chapter, if you want to see where the grant goes and what happens next, hit subscribe. Because this story isn't over, it's just getting started. My name is Linda. Thank you for listening. Now go write your own closing table.